So lads, today the referees gave the report on the situation, and it's even worse. It's even worse than I imagined, and it was pretty grim.
The WNBA referees just released their official report about the Connecticut Sun disaster, and it's somehow even worse than we thought. Their explanations for targeting Caitlin Clark while protecting her attackers are so ridiculous that fans are absolutely losing their minds. This report proves everything we suspected about corrupt officiating in the league.
Why was JC Sheldon's foul upgraded to a flagrant one? In the judgment of the officials, the foul by Sheldon was unnecessary. The contact to Clark's face. Furthermore, there was a wind-up and impact, and the contact to face carries potential for injury. How did you come to the conclusion that that is a flagrant one? How did you come up to the conclusion that it was unnecessary, there was a wind-up, and it was to the face? The three of them that is a flagrant 2. By definition, you have described a flagrant 2.
After seeing the refs' pathetic explanations, do you think the WNBA is deliberately trying to sabotage Caitlin Clark? The official referee report from the Connecticut Sun versus Indiana Fever game just dropped, and I'm here to tell you that it's the most damning piece of evidence we've ever seen about corrupt WNBA officiating. These refs didn't just fail at their job, they exposed themselves as completely biased against Caitlin Clark while simultaneously protecting the players who assaulted her. Let me break down this absolute joke of a report because every single explanation makes the officiating look worse than it already did. The referees essentially admitted to everything fans have been screaming about while somehow thinking their justifications made sense. It's like watching someone confess to a crime while insisting they're innocent. First, let's talk about their explanation for why JC Sheldon's eye-gouging attack on Clark was only called a flagrant 1 instead of the obvious flagrant 2 and ejection it should have been. The ref said Sheldon's foul was unnecessary with wind-up and impact to Clark's face that carries potential for injury. Read that again slowly because they just described a textbook flagrant 2 while explaining why they called it a flagrant 1.
Unnecessary contact, wind up and unnecessary. The two of those can be a flagrant 2. And face. You have described why was it a flagrant 2. You have just described a flagrant 2 as your answer for why it was upgraded to a flagrant 1. You have just described the flagrant.
The criteria for a flagrant 2 includes unnecessary contact, wind up, and potential for injury. The referees literally listed all 3 elements in their explanation for why it wasn't a flagrant 2. It's like saying someone committed murder while explaining why you only charged them with jaywalking. The complete lack of logic in their reasoning exposes how predetermined their decision was. What makes this even more infuriating is that Sheldon's attack had nothing to do with basketball. Clark was dribbling with her left hand when Sheldon clawed her right eye. The ball was nowhere near where the contact occurred. This wasn't an accidental collision during a basketball play. It was a deliberate attempt to injure the league's biggest star. Yet somehow the refs found a way to minimize it. Now let's examine their pathetic explanation for why Marina Mabrey wasn't ejected after sprinting across the court to body-check Clark to the ground during a dead ball situation. The refs said Mabrey's contact did not rise to the level of an ejection and did not meet the criteria for flagrant penalty. Apparently, assault during a dead ball doesn't count as long as it's against Caitlin Clark. The Mabrey incident was so obviously flagrant that even casual fans were calling for ejection in real time. She had no basketball reason to be anywhere near Clark, let alone body-checking her to the ground. It was pure retaliation, designed to intimidate and potentially injure. But according to these corrupt refs, that's just good old-fashioned basketball. these refs says not piece of profile from 4-6 clients. Here's where the report gets absolutely ridiculous. They somehow found a way to give Caitlin Clark a technical foul for reacting in an unsportsmanlike manner after being clawed in the eye and body checked to the ground. Let me get this straight. Getting assaulted and then holding your injured eye while trying to get away from your attackers is unsportsmanlike behavior? What exactly was she supposed to do in that situation?
Can you specifically detail what you mean by get control of the game, just to be in your words?
Get control of the game is call the fouls that are actually happening on the floor. Right, and consistently call the fouls that are actually happening on the floor. Okay, not just if somebody swings and misses, right? Consistently call the fouls.
The refs essentially penalized Clark for being the victim of assault. She got scratched in the eye, belly bumped by Sheldon, and then blindsided by Mabry while holding her injured eye. Her crime was apparently not taking this abuse silently enough for the referee's liking. It's victim blaming taken to its most absurd extreme. The Tina Charles technical foul explanation was equally bizarre. According to the refs, Charles ran towards Caitlin in an unsportsmanlike manner. So, pointing at someone and walking in their direction now qualifies as unsportsmanlike conduct worthy of a technical foul. But clawing someone's eye and body checking them to the ground is just regular basketball contact. The double standard is so obvious it's insulting. The Sophie Cunningham flagrant 2 explanation was the only one that made any sense, which ironically highlighted how wrong all the other calls were. They said her contact was unnecessary and excessive, which it absolutely was. Sophie grabbed Sheldon around the neck in retaliation for what had been done to Clark. The difference is that Sophie's action was actually called appropriately, while the original assaults were minimized. What's particularly damning about this whole sequence is that the referees admitted they lost control of the game. They said the situation escalated because they failed to handle the earlier incidents properly. Yet, instead of taking responsibility for their failures, they found ways to blame everyone except the players who actually started the problems. The Lindsay Allen ejection for fighting was another joke. She got caught up in the scuffle after Sophie went after Sheldon, but her involvement was minimal compared to what others had done throughout the game. Somehow she got ejected, while Mabry, who committed the most egregious assault, remained in the game. The selective enforcement was laughably obvious. Coach Stephanie White's handling of this situation in the post-game press conference was absolutely perfect. When reporters tried to get Clark to comment on the officiating, White stepped in and took over the questioning. She protected her star player from having to navigate the political minefield of criticizing refs while making it clear that the officiating was unacceptable. White's comments about the referees were devastating because they were delivered with professional restraint while being completely damning. She said the officials knew from the first quarter that things were getting out of hand, but they failed to control the situation. She essentially accused them of incompetence while maintaining plausible deniability. The most brutal part of White's comments was when she talked about how everyone in the league is getting better except the officials. She praised the players for being faster, stronger, and more athletic than ever before, then casually mentioned that the refs haven't kept up with the evolution of the game. It was diplomatic devastation. White's approach was masterful because she built up the league and players while isolating the refs as the problem. She didn't attack the WNBA as an organization or criticize other teams. She made it clear that the only issue was officiating competence, which makes it harder for the league to dismiss her concerns as biased complaints. The fact that every coach in the league has been complaining about officiating shows this isn't just an Indiana fever problem. When there's universal agreement that the refs are failing, it becomes impossible to dismiss as sour grapes or team-specific bias. The problem is systemic and obvious to everyone involved. What makes this situation even more frustrating is that it was completely preventable. If the refs had simply ejected Sheldon after her eye-gouging attack, none of the subsequent drama would have happened. Sophie Cunningham wouldn't have felt the need to retaliate, and the game could have continued without incident. Instead, Their failure to appropriately punish the initial assault created a situation where players felt they had to police themselves. Sophie essentially did the ref's job for them by making it clear that attacking Clark would have consequences. She took one for the team because the officials wouldn't protect their star player. The pattern of officiating in Clark's games throughout her second season has been consistently problematic. She routinely gets hit with contact that would result in flagrant fouls for other players, while her reactions to being assaulted somehow warrant technical fouls. The double standard is so established that it's become predictable. The international implications of this officiating disaster can't be ignored either. Basketball fans around the world are watching how the WNBA treats its biggest star, and what they're seeing is embarrassing. When your officials are openly biased against your most marketable player, it damages the league's credibility globally. The social media reaction to this referee report has been overwhelmingly negative for the WNBA. Fans are openly mocking the explanations and calling out the obvious bias. When your officiating becomes a laughingstock, it affects the perceived legitimacy of competition results. What's particularly galling about this whole situation is how it affects Clark's ability to play her natural game. When she knows she won't get fair treatment from officials, she has to modify her approach to avoid situations where she might get hurt. That diminishes the quality of basketball for everyone watching. The precedent this sets for future games is troubling. If players know they can target Clark without facing serious consequences while anyone who defends her gets ejected, it creates a dangerous dynamic. The refs have essentially painted a target on Clark's back while removing her protection. The business implications of this officiating bias are staggering. Clark is the biggest draw in women's basketball, bringing in millions of viewers and selling out arenas. When refs create situations that could potentially injure her or affect her performance, they're risking the league's most valuable asset. The fact that this happened in a nationally televised game makes it even worse. Casual fans tuning in to watch Clark got to see her get assaulted while the refs penalized her for being a victim. That's not exactly the kind of product that builds long-term audience loyalty. The referee crew from this game should face serious consequences for their handling of this situation. Their official report essentially admits to multiple failures while trying to justify obviously biased decisions. When officials expose themselves this badly, there should be accountability. The timing of this disaster couldn't be worse for the WNBA either. The league is in the middle of trying to negotiate new media rights deals and establish itself as a legitimate professional sports organization. When potential partners see this kind of officiating dysfunction, it raises serious questions about the league's competence. Looking at comparable situations in other professional sports, it's hard to find anything this blatantly biased. Even leagues with officiating problems don't typically see their refs openly admit to failing while simultaneously blaming the victims of their failures. This level of incompetence is almost unprecedented. The fact that Clark has to deal with this garbage during her second season is particularly frustrating. She should be focused on developing her game and helping her team compete for championships. Instead, she's dealing with refs who seem determined to make her job as difficult as possible. The contrast between how this situation was handled versus similar incidents involving other players is stark. When lesser-known players get into altercations, the refs usually sort things out quickly and fairly. But when anything involves Clark, the situation seems to escalate and get handled poorly. The international basketball community is taking notice of this situation too. When foreign leagues and players see how the WNBA treats its biggest star, it affects their perception of American women's basketball as a whole. This kind of bias doesn't stay contained within one organization. What's most maddening about this referee report is how it confirms everything fans have been saying about biased officiating. The refs essentially admitted to treating Clark differently while somehow thinking their explanations justified their actions. It's like confessing to a crime while insisting you're innocent. The long-term damage this does to the WNBA's credibility is immeasurable. When your own officials expose themselves as biased through their official explanations, it undermines the legitimacy of every game they officiate. Fans start questioning whether competition results are legitimate or predetermined. The fact that we're even having this conversation shows how far the WNBA still has to go in terms of professional officiating standards. Successful sports leagues don't have refs who openly admit to bias while trying to justify it. They maintain at least the appearance of fairness and competence. This referee report will probably be remembered as one of the most damaging documents in WNBA history. It provides written proof of what fans have been alleging about biased officiating while somehow making the situation worse through laughably bad explanations. The immediate aftermath of this report's release has been brutal for the league's reputation. Sports commentators, business experts, and casual observers are all expressing disbelief at the ref's explanations. When your officiating becomes a national embarrassment, you've got serious institutional problems. Looking ahead, this situation will likely influence how other teams approach playing against Clark. If they know the refs won't protect her appropriately, some players might be tempted to test those boundaries. That creates a dangerous situation for everyone involved. The most infuriating part of this whole disaster is how unnecessary it was. If the refs had simply done their job competently, none of this controversy would exist. Instead, their failures created a situation that damaged multiple players, coaches, and the league itself. This referee report stands as permanent evidence of WNBA officiating bias against Caitlin Clark. Years from now, when people look back at how the league treated its biggest star, this document will be Exhibit A in the case for institutional dysfunction and corruption. This referee report just proved everything we've been saying about corrupt WNBA officiating. They literally admitted to bias while trying to justify it, and fans are absolutely furious about the double standards. The league's credibility is in shambles after this disaster. What did you think of their pathetic explanations? Smash that like button, subscribe for more truth, and let me know your thoughts below.